Hello, everyone. Welcome to the November 12th Advisory Committee on Accessibility and Inclusiveness. A little bit echoey in here, but that's okay. Might just be the volume. Are people online able to hear okay and it's not distorted? Okay, great. Thank you so much to everyone who's joined us in person and online today. I'll call this meeting to order and start with the introduction of late items and just turn it momentarily over to Ms. Ricard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There are no late items to be added to the agenda today, but we do have a brief update that we would like to share with the committee members at this time regarding the last committee meeting on September 10th. During that meeting, you may recall that a participant called Read AI joined the Zoom meeting, and there were some questions in that regard that staff were not able to answer at that point, but that we have looked into since the meeting. So just to provide an update, in that regard, staff would like to clarify that this was not a service used by city staff, and staff did not know who had invited the Read AI to participate in the meeting. So Read AI was, as a result, removed from the meeting at that point of time. Following the meeting, staff have determined that Read AI is an AI note-taking service that joins the user's electronic meetings automatically to take notes and track action items. As the city does not have a way to control the collection and storage of potential personal information by this service, Read AI will not be admitted into the Zoom meetings moving forward. Staff take, of course, minutes of all meetings and provide the draft minutes to the committee members for information and reference as soon as they are available. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that update. So I'll now take a motion for the adoption of the agenda, moved by Richard, seconded by Tammy. Thank you very much. All in favor? And that carries unanimously. Thank you. And we have one set of minutes from our September 10th meeting. Did anyone have any amendments or additions to those minutes? No? Okay, then if I could have a motion for the adoption. Moved by Andrea, thank you, and seconded by Richard. All in favor? Thank you, that carries. And under council communications, there's just a brief update that during our October 6th regular council meeting, based on the recommendation from this committee, council directed staff to add and prioritize the Maffeo Sutton Park assessment audit to the list of parks, trails, and open spaces being audited by the Rick Hansen Foundation in 2026. So thank you to the committee for that, and that is being advanced by council and staff. And moving into presentations, we have one on the Nanaimo Tenant Protections Project, and we have Christine Mays here to help lead us through that. One of our excellent planners with the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Eastmere, and hello, committee members. My name is Christine Mays. I'm a planner with the city's community planning team and the project manager for the Rental Tenant Relocation Assistance Project. I just wanted to note that Lisa Brinkman wishes to express her regret. Unfortunately, she was unable to join today. She's just recovering from a cold. So just to let you guys know, we're really excited to begin engagement on this project with the Advisory Committee for Accessibility and Inclusivity. Your input is going to be essential to ensure our approach reflects the needs of all residents of the city, and we really look forward to hearing your thoughts. Just for some context, Nanaimo currently has approximately 108 purpose-built rental buildings, and that totals about 4,200 units. Many of these were built between the 1960s and the 1980s. And as these older buildings are reaching the end of their life cycle, the city may start to see redevelopment of these existing rental stock buildings. And, this approach is supported by city plan policies and zoning that encourages higher densities on some of these lots. And what redevelopment can mean is that, it can mean tenant displacement, and residents in older buildings will sometimes have limited relocation options. The project goal is to develop a policy and/or regulatory framework that supports tenants facing displacement, and that's due to redevelopment. Just to let you guys know, just for more information, there is a project webpage that's currently on the city's website, and we're updating that regularly. And soon we're going to be launching a Get Involved project page, and that's going to be coming soon. And we're also anticipating launching a renter survey in the new year to gather broader community input. With that, I'm pleased to introduce the city's consultant for this project. So Janelle Dirksen, she's the senior community planner, and Louis Wong, planning assistant from City Spaces Consulting. And I'll turn it over to Janelle for the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can everybody hear me okay online? Great, thank you for the thumbs up. As mentioned, I am Janelle Dirksen. I'm a senior community planner at City Spaces Consulting, and I am joined today as well with my colleague Louis Wong, who's also joining virtually. We are coming to you from Vancouver, located on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Apologies, we could not be there in person today. Next slide. So today's presentation is to introduce Nanaimo's tenant protections project and to hear directly from you. So we will have time at the end of the presentation to go over your thoughts and have a couple of discussion questions to walk through. We will cover in the presentation a project overview and background. We will look at the Residential Tenancy Act and talk about how this is different than tenant protection bylaws. We will talk about tenant protection measures. So this is going to be specific things like compensation and moving support. And then who will this impact? So what types of buildings, scenarios would be eligible for tenant protections? And again, yes, hear from you at the end. Next slide. So on the slide, we have a project overview, which includes a timeline. The purpose of this work is to establish tenant protections for Nanaimo and those protections to support people who are being displaced from their current rentals. The timeline shows projects starting in October, so just last month. The next step will be, as Christine mentioned, community engagement. So this fall, we're going to kick off some engagement with interest holders, followed by a renter survey, which would be made public for the community. Once we've heard some feedback, we will go and develop options for tenant protections, as well as financial feasibility. So testing to see what options would still be financially feasible. And then in the spring, March, April, draft a policy or bylaw to implement tenant protections in the city. Next slide. So for some background, Nanaimo's city plan encourages requiring what they call tenant relocation plans to support tenants who are impacted by redevelopment and being displaced. The province of BC just recently, in 2025, introduced new rules that allow municipalities to create what they're calling tenant protection bylaws. These bylaws can require property owners to provide supports for tenants who are being displaced, and that can include financial compensation, moving costs, support finding new homes, among other things. Next slide. How is this different from the Residential Tenancy Act? So the province does have protections for tenants within the RTA, the Residential Tenancy Act. And that includes things such as notice for ending a tenancy and financial compensation. A tenant protection bylaw is a separate tool. So it's a tool for the city specifically to use and to have additional requirements for redevelopment projects. So when an older rental unit is being demolished and new units are being created, this is additional protection separate from Residential Tenancy Act that can be added to support those tenants. Next slide. Tenant protection measures would be included within a tenant protection bylaw. And those measures, so the province has set out a number of things that can be included. A couple of typical things that you might see would be a communication plan. So that would be ongoing updates for tenants on the status of the project. So through being tenancy agreements terminated, so being displaced, through the construction of the new build, and potential move back-ins. So all that communication would be a requirement under the bylaw. A relocation plan is another piece, which would be established for each resident to support their unique relocation. So moving from the old building to interim housing, and potentially to the new building. Right of first refusal is another measure. This essentially means the right to enter back into the new development. So the old unit will be demolished and rebuilt, and this is the right to enter into that new build on the same site, if applicable. Now, I said if applicable because there would be specific eligibility requirements. So those would have to be set up through the bylaw and make sense for the city, and it would set eligibility of who could go into the new build. It would also set things such as what rents would be in the new build, whether it would be a discounted rent, or what exactly that would look like. So that would be explored under that right of first refusal. And finally, another common thing that can show up is financial compensation. So this could look like a lump sum payment of rent. It could look like top-ups for interim housing. It could look like moving support, potentially a flat rate for a moving company, and other things. So those are just a high-level list of potential things that could be in that bylaw. Next slide. Thank you. So who will this impact? This project will consider protections for tenants of rental apartment buildings. So likely that would be 4 or more units, but it will be established through engagement and through this process. There's a few scenarios to consider. So renovations, demolitions, and redevelopment of existing rental buildings that are occupied. And then also conversion of rental buildings that are getting converted into strata ownership. So condos could be a consideration as well. All right, next slide. So we're going to have some time for a roundtable discussion. We really wanted to have some time to hear from the committee on your thoughts. And we have a couple of guiding questions. These are suggested questions, so feel free to ask your own questions. But I will read these off. The first one is, who tends to be the most affected by displacement? And this is due to redevelopment, so a building being demolished and rebuilt. Are there certain neighborhoods that might be more at risk in Nanaimo? And then what difficulties might people with disabilities face if they have to move? So is there additional supports that should be considered? All right, next slide. Okay, and that is the end. So we've left contact information for myself and for Christine on the slide. And we can open the floor for discussion and just flip back to the slide with the questions as a guidance. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. So I'll take a speakers list and I'll start with Richard.
I would definitely say seniors are probably the most. Oh yeah, thank you. Forgot about that. I would definitely say that seniors are probably going to be easily the most heavily affected by things like this, especially because like the list just in OT to get into like assisted type housing is like 2 years, so.
Okay, and I will go to Sean and then Bay.
Yeah, so I guess who tends to be most affected? I mean, people with disabilities are certainly among the most vulnerable and experience eviction rates at a higher percentage than other populations, depending on the disability and the challenges associated with it. That, and I guess affected because when there's a lack of housing in a general sense, so if there's not enough accessible housing, which we know there isn't, options for people to move into that allow them to stay within their community. So if they're familiar with the neighborhood, there's just not as many options, and it is often up to the discretion of the new landlord, one, for that place to be affordable, for it to be accessible, and a variety of other things. So certain neighborhoods. I mean, there are certainly apartment dense neighborhoods in Nanaimo. I think the Rutherford area seems to have a lot of apartment density in it. And I suppose the hospital area is gaining a lot of apartment style density. So, but I think the bigger question around the difficulties people with disabilities face if they have to move, that is a long list. Loss of community, unaffordability. So keeping things consistent, if they were in a unit that was maybe more affordable, moving to another unit likely isn't going to be, especially if there were sort of rent control measures in place. I think the timing of it, I think access to communications, if someone has a developmental disability or someone lives in that way, the way things are communicated might be imperfect. They may be nuanced. So I don't know that all developers are going to be concerned about making their communications accessible to a broad audience. So people may be excluded from those conversations or may feel not able to participate in meaningful ways. So how developers are required to communicate. People may not have advocates there, so lack of advocacy supports for people who are being forced to move so that they know where they can push and not just feel like they have to do what's being offered to them. So I think, yeah, there's a lot. I mean, other people have also addressed this. So I was looking today, and the city of Toronto has put some really unique stuff in place around how to support people who are being moved as a result of redevelopment. And one example is that if you are a person with special needs, the financial compensation comes in at 4 times the standard rate for a person without. So there's much more financial compensation to support that. So I think, sort of looking around to see what best practices are. I think also Toronto required that any developer going into these meetings would require that a city staff be a part of in-person conversations, so that city staff be present while those negotiations are taking place, which is a means of advocacy. So I think there's lots to do. I think any neighborhood with apartments is at risk, especially with older ones. I mean, we just saw it in Nanaimo. There's an apartment complex in Harewood that was recently demolished, and there were a lot of people with disabilities living in that building who had spent a long time in their building community and didn't want to go, and maybe didn't have options available that were nearby or allowed them to operate. So I think, yeah, wherever the neighborhood is, you have to kind of create a provision so that people can remain in that community, because you're already vulnerable when you have a disability. And so learning new people and new places, access to transit, all of these things are significant barriers that need to be considered when we displace people. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. My list, I have Bay, then Tanya, and then Jocelyn and Alexandria.
Hello. About who would be most affected, it's kind of obvious, but lower income residents who live in low cost sort of apartment buildings that are older. It is just ripe for gentrification. So they're probably going to face the most, they're going to encounter the issue the most, I think. Something to consider is income assistance. So people who are on PWD or income assistance, it is difficult to find new housing because a lot of landlords prefer or insist that you're employed. So if you're disabled, they will sometimes just hang up the phone or, say, oh, you have to have a full-time job for 3 months or something like that. The another thing is if they have pets or children, it can become very, very difficult to find replacement rental housing. With pets, it's just a lot of places say no pets because they don't want the damage. But with children, like you have to have the extra bedrooms. There's a lot of places that don't really want children because they stomp and cry, create issues for landlords sometimes. So those are just some things to keep in mind. But I also wanted to mention the role of real estate investment trusts, REITs. These rather large corporations take monopolies over the rental stock in town. They will buy up buildings constantly. And what they've been doing so far is they wait for people to leave, they do some renovation, and then they double the rent. But in the meantime, they won't fix things for the residents who are there unless it's one of those like crucial things. And they will use any sort of issues as a cause to rent evict you as well. So there's a lot of tenants in these older buildings who are living with major problems, electrical issues, for example, because if they bring them up, they'll just be evicted. So, yeah, those are my thoughts.
Excellent thoughts, Bay. Thank you very much. Tanya?
Well, hold on. In the interest of time, I'm not going to repeat. I was actually going to say a lot of what Sean said around people with disabilities. I will point out, I think the biggest thing that I find is somebody who did work in the Disability Resource Center for a while ago. Some of our clients, it used to take them a long time to get comfortable and safe in a particular building or environment because of they had multi disabilities, both developmental and mental health, and so they're very unique to house in general. So I look at that, and then I look at someone like myself. I mean, we have a fair number of apartment complexes in my area here. I'm by the hospital, but none of them have the universal design that I need for the washroom and such. So, yeah.
Thank you, Tanya. Jocelyn?
Thanks. I agree. I think a lot of what I was going to say has been said. So, thank you for that. I just wanted to, there's a couple of small details just to make sure that they're reflected. People on pensions like CPP disability and PWD are not able to make a certain lump sum of money as well. So that would have to be a consideration if the component of like a lump sum for people having to move out for a redevelopment would need to be, I don't know, phrased or required in such a way that there's some flexibility in how that's taken in so that money remains for that individual's rental costs or modifications down the road, assuming they are able to move into the new building. I think kind of following on that, it makes me think of how many folks if they are able to get any kind of modifications or equipment installed, like an overhead hoist, that is a one-time build in that they might have had support from a government fund or something, and moving it's not possible, but they'll need it in the new location. And so I think someone mentioned that the amount that they should be compensated is calculated as quite a bit more than the average person. I think that makes a lot of sense. You know, if it was me, I always have to hire someone or bring a bunch of friends because I can't move anything. But I'm thinking of some of our members who would need to have like rather complex accessibility equipment kind of rebuilt in their new home. So I think so the money involved would reflect that, but also that the needs that they had in the old building would be recognized in the new, because new buildings, there's often new rules to protect it and that kind of thing. And the availability of interim housing that's physically accessible is so difficult. Like 2 years for seniors, often it's a similar struggle for longer, for accessible housing, and I can really wonder what situation people are going to end up in if they need a certain level of accessibility and their own building is being redeveloped. So I don't have any great answers for that, but I know um, sort of the provision and support for a better or for some creative answers. Like I know someone who is having a home modified for accessibility under a third party funder, and they put her up in a university dorm because it was the only physically accessible option for her. Um, and they just had to overlook the pets because there was no other place for her to be. So there's just a lot of complexities that sort of build on each other that I think would need to be considered. And I just echo the fact that I think people with disabilities often develop over a long period of time the supports they need in their community. The person who helps you take your garbage out, and the caregivers who live in the area who are part of your care staff or whatever, and that's a sort of maybe a less tangible impact that it can have. So just moving to another building isn't the same outcome. So they might need longer, or advocacy, for example, if they get health authority caregivers who come in to sort of advocate for a little more support for a time. So those are some of the things that came to my mind.
Thank you very much, Jocelyn. I have Alexandria, Nicole, Councillor Armstrong, and then I can start the second round of speakers with Richard and Bay. So Alexandria?
Thank you. I'd just like to reiterate the need for accessible plain language communication across all levels of the project. So that's not only in the work that you're doing, Janelle, with your organization, but accessible plain language communication within survey processes, communicating back out to tenants and people who may be affected, and a requirement for all of the developers, rental agencies to also adopt plain language communication and ensure that this is accessible, not only for people with disability, but anyone who may experience lower rates of literacy, which we may tend to see in the rental population around those with lower income, and other barriers to literacy. And I think that's all I can remember for the moment. Thank you.
Thanks, Alexandria. And Nicole?
I think most of what I had to say has been covered. The one thing, one of the big things is the size of units. I see units being shrunk as we increase density. And for both people with physical accessibility needs, the bathrooms get smaller, hallways get narrower, whatever, but also the number of bedrooms, and families are having a harder and harder time finding enough space for their families to be. So that, and that the new build should have, I would hope, more accessibility to the tenants than in something that was built in the 70s. Definitely not less, because I would worry that in an effort to increase density, that we might sacrifice what we already have, which is larger units.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong?
Yeah, size was going to be one of my issues too. I just read a great article in the Globe and Mail on that. That's one of the reasons a lot of the condos aren't selling, because they're too small for people. Second issue that came up was when I deal a lot with seniors, and a lot of times the bathtubs are far too high, so when they move, they can't get into, and they've been talking to developers about that, so like possibly looking at showers. And another big issue is the lack of parking for those residents with disabilities. as well as their carrieds. There's been cases when they've actually lost their carrieds because there's no parking, so the carrieds refuse to go. So I think that's something that has to be looked at, as well as universal design is huge. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I go to my second round of speakers, I'm going to go to Sarah.
Thank you. I just want to echo what Bay touched on and what Jocelyn touched on, really coming back to the financial piece, since often that's my focus, is, when developing these policies, especially the financial piece, to be mindful of the fact that someone on PWD, their shelter portion is $500 a month. And for two people, like myself and my son, $695 a month is all in BC we're getting for our shelter portion. So, even just to have that number rattling around when you're making policies, to just remind yourself of the kinds of challenges that these people who are on BC provincial disability are facing financially. And then to echo what Jocelyn said about making sure that if there is any financial compensation, that it is worded in such a way that it is not income. Because otherwise they end up with their checks clawed back. If you can phrase it more as a one-time gift, or there's ways you can do it. For people who are on disability, they can have up to $100,000 in assets. But it can't be considered income. It's a whole thing. So, those are things that I really think are important to keep in mind just financially.
Yeah, thank you for that point. It is critical, the piece you mentioned around income for people who are on PWD, and how devastatingly low that number is. People are basically being kept in legislated poverty because of the way that system works. And unfortunately, we can't solve that here today, but we can continue to advocate for it and acknowledge out loud the inhumanity, really, of the rates that people are forced to live on. I'm going to go to my second round of speakers now. Bay, thank you.
Hi. Yeah, it's actually about that shelter allowance. If a person on disability, I believe it applies to income assistance as well. If you receive money that goes towards rent, like that's its purpose, I believe that can affect your shelter amount. I do believe they will take that off sometimes dollar for dollar. So I really encourage you to reach out to the Ministry of Social Development and Poverty Reduction and talk to them about that and how to strike a balance there.
Yeah, and there must be a way that they do this, because we're building on rental protections that the province provides. So I think that there must be a way to make that work, but certainly keeping that in mind. On my list, I have Richard and then Sean, and if anyone else wants to weigh in, raise your hand.
One thing that has been mentioned is pets and finding space that accepts pets. But when it comes to things like service animals, although they are not seen as pets under the law, property owners' idea of service animals may be otherwise, and will still give like a space to someone without a service animal in a lot of cases due to that level of stigma. And so with that, I was thinking that we should definitely be taking a look at the amount of pet accepted spaces there can be. And then also improving access to services like for those people can include things like not just having digital communication, because for those people with like technological barriers, and of course not just having physical posters or physical notices, because people like me can't read them that are blind. So that can often be a bit of a barrier with that level of communication too. So having different streams and increasing knowledge about resources in the community would be another thing that I was kind of thinking that developers could consider. So like Senior First BC can help with going and reviewing any of the documentation, or local advocacy groups. Even possible idea of like improving access towards occupational therapists or social worker when needed. So.
Thank you. Sean and then Jocelyn.
Yeah, just to kind of talk about maybe on top of the financial stuff is that also many apartments may require a credit check. And if you're on PWD or you're on income assistance, you probably won't pass a credit check to the satisfaction of the landlord. So, you know, I mean, I know the affordable marker is 30%, but we all know that that ship has long sailed and sank and is at the bottom of the ocean far, far away. But I do think like ensuring, you know, making sure that language that exists to make sure that people who are accessing low end of market housing can continue to access that regardless of where they are, and that there's some means in place to even subsidize for the short term if a unit that matches their financial situation isn't available. Something to that effect. I think for engagement, on top of what Alexandria was talking about, I think when you're working to communicate with a group of people, many renters, especially low-end market renters, are not thinking about engaging in a survey or participating in feedback sessions. They're thinking about what they're going to eat, where they're going to get their medicine, can they find a job. So I think engagement has to really be, and it's cumbersome, but it's effective. Like the best method of communication is in person. I'm in a room talking. There's an advocate there, someone who can support me while I'm there. And then, so it's a direct conversation. So I really think prioritizing that sort of direct communication over, say, an email or a printed survey that someone might see, but if they're really just living day to day, they're not thinking, gee, I need to weigh in on this renter survey. So prioritizing direct engagement and making sure that developers are responsive to that through this survey and through the entire process. And then I think a lot of people have sort of talked about the systems that people with disabilities rely upon. So if you live, for instance, in one part of town, maybe the Handy Dart comes there. We know there's like either a 2-week or a 0 waiting list for the Handy Dart. Like sometimes they just say, no, we're not going to go to this space. So while it may be affordable, if the person can't access transportation or if it's a distance from a bus route, maybe they're used to being able to walk out their door and walk 30 feet to a bus route or access a bus route that's relatively close. If all of a sudden that changes to 200 meters, half a kilometer, then you've essentially cut that person off from being able to access. So we might not notice that, but it is very impactful when transportation options are so limited. So I think just really important to consider all the systems that people rely on, which also include the care systems, healthcare, health supports, all of those things. People tend to live often. I think people with disabilities will live near the thing that they access the most. So they're looking for services within the neighborhoods that have, the services that they access most frequently. So that really has to be a consideration in any displacement, is not just are we moving them to a place that's affordable and accessible, but also does it allow them to have the same proximity to the services that they're used to and need to be able to access day to day. Thank you.
100%. Okay, I'm going to go to Jocelyn and then Sarah, and then I think we will wrap this convo because I don't see other hands. Jocelyn?
Hi, thanks. I just had actually partly a question. I missed a little bit of the slide where we talked about the province's Residential Tenancy Act and then how it works in municipal tenant protection acts. And my understanding is that in the Residential Tenancy Act, if tenants have to be moved out of a place for redevelopment, when they are moved back, they are offered, or they're sort of grandfathered in to get a similar or same rent they were paying before. And I'm asking, is that accurate? And is that something that the city should be protecting as well, or if the province doesn't?
Thank you for your question. Through the chair to the committee member, I'm not too sure about that, and maybe I can ask Janelle whether she's got any thoughts. But for first right of refusal, it is for 5+ rental units under the Rental Tenancy Act. And then sort of the financial compensation is 1 month's rent or last month's rent under the Rental Tenancy Act.
But the like if I was paying $750 for my 1 bedroom in this impossibly cheap apartment, and then a year later when I was given the first right of refusal, would I be offered something close to it, maybe with inflation added on? Like, will that rent still be available in this new building?
I'm not sure if Janelle's still on the call.
Yeah, I can take that question. Thank you. So under the tenant protections bylaw that the city would take on, this is something the city can determine. So you can determine if that rental rate would remain the same. Some cities have done that. Some cities have said it's 20% below market, so just discounted. Others could do that geared to income. So this is that process the city will undertake in the research. And part of that question is also the financial feasibility, right? So if there are, say, 20 tenants moving from an old building into a new building, how much will that affect the project viability of the new build? Will they still be able to build it as well? So those questions are exactly what we're going to be doing with the city, is to walk through what makes sense for the context of Nanaimo and what can be achieved through that right of first refusal. What's really great about the tenant protection bylaw is that under the Residential Tenancy Act, they do have right of first refusal, but it's only really for renovictions. So this is actually filling a gap for those redevelopment properties. So that's a very positive thing about introducing them. Thank you.
I'm just to ask, will you come back to us once that part of the work is done so we can hear about like what your research said about how that could look in Nanaimo?
Pass that to Christine.
Thank you, through the chair to the committee member. I would assume that we would come back for potentially a second round. I'm not sure whether that'll be when we've got an opportunity to do some financial feasibility testing or when we have a draft bylaw. And we'll certainly, I think, look toward council to provide us a bit more direction.
Yeah, and certainly I would be looking for this to come through this committee and getting the endorsement of this committee before going to council so that council is aware that it has the backing of the Akai. I'm going to go to Sarah and then a final quick note from Sean.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment, and I don't have any of the correct verbiage for this, but recently a new process was introduced around mobile home land development and the protection of people who own mobile homes on properties in Nanaimo. And I was really impressed with what I read about the protections that ended up being put into place by our council. But what also really impressed me was that the process included a group of people who were directly impacted. So there was a consulting group of people who were mobile homeowners living in these parks that could potentially be developed at some point. So, you know, again, following that principle of nothing for us without us, my very strong suggestion would be, you know, to pull together a consulting group of local Nanaimo renters who could help inform this conversation. Because, I mean, obviously, we all think we have a lot to say, and I think we do, you know, but it's especially there's lots of other aspects that even this very wide-ranging, you know, committee couldn't touch on, but renters could really dig down into. That's just a suggestion.
Thank you, and I do think that is part of what's happening with this consultation process. But yes, having like a formal group would be great. And maybe Christine wants to speak briefly to confirm that something like that is happening.
Yes, through the chair to the committee. Thank you very much. It's a great question. And so one of the next steps that we're going to be doing is reaching out to nonprofit housing providers as well as advocacy groups. And so that's going to be our next stage of engagement.
Thank you. And finally, last word to Sean.
I just want to clock the statement about financial feasibility and whether things are feasible to developers as they redevelop old spaces and whether it's feasible to offer. I honestly, like, that just kind of gives me pause because I think people that don't want things to be financially feasible can find ways to make it that. And is it in the best interest of the developer to make things affordable to people on the low end of the income spectrum? Or is it in their best interest to charge as much rent as they can for the space? We all know the answer to that. So I understand that buildings cost money and development costs money, but our priority here isn't to make sure that developers can afford to build new buildings. It's to make sure that our most vulnerable people have access to affordable and accessible housing. So I just feel like that, for me anyway, is a really important marker when we think about financial feasibility, is that the people who are being displaced need to come first and the developer comes second. Thank you.
Thank you. I see a floating thumbs up from Bay and some nodding around the table to that. So thank you. And thank you to staff and to our presenters for that presentation and the work that you're doing on this really important work as a renter myself. Thank you. So next up, we have a presentation on the Bebin Outdoor Classroom and Play Space, and to be introduced by Darcy Osborne, our Director of Parks, Recreation and Culture.
Through the chair, good afternoon, everyone. One of the key takeaways that we learned from the pandemic was that there are some extreme benefits to being outside, spending time outside, whether that is social, physical, emotional, or the wide gamut. On January 12th, 2022, staff brought an exciting project to the previous Advisory Committee on Accessibility and Inclusiveness, looking for feedback on some of the initial designs. And I would like to introduce to today Damon Johnson, our Manager of Community Recreation, as well as the Facility Manager for Bebin Park. Damon is here today to provide an update on that project and let you know where the feedback, what it's evolved to. So, Damon.
Welcome, Damon.
Wonderful, and thank you for the introduction, Ms. Osborne. Always great to be here at the committee. My name is Damon Johnston, Manager of Recreation Services, and as Ms. Osborne pointed out, the Manager of Bebin Park Social Center. Again, great to be here today to share just this really, really exciting project, which I think is just another enhancement to the Bebin Park recreation and culture portfolio. And so my hope today is to share a little bit of background about where this project came from. I'm going to do a little rewind and bring everybody up to speed on the initial concept for the Bebin Park outdoor classroom and play space. And then we're going to fast forward, because we started this process in 2021, to 2025, where we are today, and excited to say that we've actually broken ground on this project and it is currently under construction. So as Ms. Osborne pointed out, this project came to us as a sort of an inspiration through the pandemic and that real need that we recognize for people to connect outside and really connect with nature. And the theme through this whole design has been to really ensure that it is accessible and inclusive for people to access. We also wanted to create more programming opportunities inside the facility and outside the facility. And just to provide some context, this is located behind the Bebin Park Social Center, where rooms 4, 5, and 6 are. And if you were in this space, you would be standing looking out at Altrusa Playground. So at that end, if you've been down there, there are 5, well, now 4, beautiful, beautiful cherry trees that are in the space. So as mentioned, this was brought forward to the ACAI committee for input and feedback back in January of 2022. And at that time, there were several questions and comments and feedback provided by the committee. And one of those was in the design, which I will take you through. It was to ensure that particularly one of the features called the Willow Tunnel was accessible by wheelchair. So ensuring that the opening into this feature was accessible. Another question that came up was around opportunities for programming. And the example that was used by a committee member at that time was with the Indigenous Cultural Learning Program that the school district has as part of their curriculum, is there an opportunity for us to consider offering programming like that? Another opportunity was, or sort of question that was asked by the committee at that time was around security, and just acknowledging that security needs to be factored in to the design. So if we could go back to the first slide. So this picture is of the original concept. We retained a landscape architect in 2021 to help us through this inspiration. So I'm just going to kind of highlight some of the key features of the space. So that's okay. So this is the location of the space. Again, so at the bottom of the screen is the social center, and at the top of the screen is the driveway where vehicles travel. And the feature includes, or the space includes a new pergola, which is the new entry point into the play space and the outdoor classroom. To the lower sort of left-hand side, there is an outdoor classroom space. So this is where an instructor or teacher could host a classroom session. And then as you come into the pergola, off to the right-hand side, you can see sort of a green pathway there. That is the accessible trailway. So that would be for mobility devices to be used, or wheelchairs, strollers, or that kind of thing. And then to the far right-hand side, you'll see a concrete area. And one of the key things with this project was to retain some of the existing infrastructures that was there to save money, but also to repurpose and reuse some of the existing features in the facility. So in that area, it's really going to be conducive to a lot of more active play, sports, recreation, and kind of games and that kind of thing. And then just above that, just where the salmon is, there's a number of just sort of natural features that can be used for play and that kind of thing. And on the far right, there's a service sort of area so that vehicles or equipment can be moved in and out to provide maintenance services as well. And then shifting back over to the left-hand side, you'll see a circular feature, which is a raised platform. So I would just offer that as we go through the presentation, this was very high-level concept. And so for the last few years, we've been working very closely with the landscape architect to come up with what we now see as the detailed design, which I'm going to share with you shortly. So quickly, just to review, my objective today is to provide project background, the project intention, a little bit about the design process, and of course, bringing our work back always to what's guiding us through city plan and the integrated action plans. So I just wanted to share with you, this is the existing site before construction started. And so this is looking from the parking lot back at the facility. The door you see there leads into rooms 4 and 5 of the facility, heavily used for after-school care. We do preschool classes in there, Red Cross babysitting classes in there, lots of different courses. So really this space is a direct extension of the programmable space there. But I show this picture because it depicts the cherry tree that's there and the root system that all these cherry trees have, and in some ways posed opportunities for design, but in other ways did pose some challenges for the design team to consider. Great, and this is just another picture of the area. So we're looking across the site, and this is that sort of sports and recreation or play space area. And the concrete that's there is going to be retained and reused. And you'll see in the final detailed design that this is actually going to be extended. The location of it right now is quite awkward because it is right sort of intersecting the main entry point to the building. And so parents will be coming to pick up kids, and balls and pucks and things are sort of flying around, and so this is going to be a much more improved space. So before I get into the detailed design, I'll just describe a little bit about the design process, and it's similar for other projects that the city has undertaken. We recruited and retained a landscape architect, several site meetings, virtual meetings, updating design drawings. And given the project started, as a concept back in 2021, there was significant cost escalation in the last 4 years that we were grappling with, that did sort of guide the design and made us reconsider some of the features that I'm going to share with you now. So apologies, this is a very sort of technical drawing. It's not as bright and colorful as the first one, but this is what we now see as the final product and the facility that's going to be constructed. So one of the goals was trying to retain the 5 large cherry trees. And after many meetings and conversations, it was determined that we did need to remove one of the 4 cherry trees in order to really meet the design goals and make sure that really that the ramp that was key to this was created. And so again, the pergola is the main entry point. You enter into a really nice space. You enter the main pathway. Right off the right-hand side, you're going to see a ramp, and then it comes down to a landing, and then a curved rampway that brings you into the main space. One of the challenges that we face in this design is the slope from the sidewalk to the building was quite significant. So we were just trying to juggle some balancing of the design in order to make it work for the site. Connected to the accessible walkway or pathway is a bridge. That bridge will be made out of cedar. It's quite low elevation. It will lead out to a circular platform that will be right directly around the tree trunk. And then it's connected to a second platform here on the left-hand side of the image on the screen. Coming down towards the building, again, you've got the outdoor classroom area. And this is where, again, teachers and instructors can facilitate a classroom session. There are teaching resources there. There are logs that can be moved around and used as equipment and tools for teaching a lesson. And there's also a classroom whiteboard or blackboard that will be available to use as a teaching tool as well. I should just touch on the surfaces. There are several surfaces in the plan. The classroom will be covered in a tile, a paver stone. And most of the other area, with the exception of where plantings will be FIBAR, and that's the fall protection that you'd see at a typical playground. It's a fabricated wood chip product. And then looking over to the right-hand side of this image, again, you see the active sort of sport area, which is being extended to create a larger area, just more conducive to a variety of activities. The Willow Tunnel is something that we're kind of working through right now. We've run into a bit of a sticking point with its design, and so we're working through options for reconsidering how that might look. Great, and so I'm just going to touch on quickly on the timeline, and then I'm happy to answer any questions the committee might have. So again, the project started back in 2021. We came to the committee in 2022. For 3 years, we did detailed design. Pleased to say that was completed in spring of this year. The project went to the market for tender in summer of this year, and construction started in October. And if all things go according to plan and things are delivered on time, we're looking at a December finish. Depending on weather and timing of concrete pouring and things like that, it could take a little bit longer. But these are just a few pictures for the committee just to kind of see the site. So these were taken very recently, last week, and it shows the demolition and kind of the area, as you can see there in the picture, that's being kept for the play space. And things will start moving pretty quickly over the next few weeks. So again, thank you very much for the opportunity to share this exciting project. I think, again, it's another amazing amenity to Beban Park. And you know, with all the development and great things that have been happening at Beban, the new pickleball courts, the Room 6 renovation in partnership with Seven Potatoes Society, the new BMX track at Beban Park, it just is a great amenity to support everything that the community, I think, is looking for at Beban Park. We will make sure that an invitation goes out to the committee members for you to attend the opening event when the project is done. And as always, if you hear things in the community or you experience the facility yourself, please feel free to share feedback anytime. Thank you very much, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I see a question from Tanya.
Thank you. Question, yes. You had mentioned the school district and our work around our Indigenous classrooms and so on and so forth. Would the space be available for outside parties to rent, or any kind of partnerships where we could actually bring a class in to use the space at some point?
Through the chair to the committee member, yes, absolutely. This will be a bookable space for any community organization to offer a program, but it would be also an opportunity for organizations to partner with the City of Nanaimo in the delivery of new program opportunities.
And just before I mute myself again, I'm actually going to have to go in a few minutes as we have our strategic directions meeting at 5, actually. So, but
Okay.
I wanted to catch this presentation.
Thank you, Tanya. We have quorum regardless, but I appreciate the note. Thank you. Jocelyn and then Tammy.
Thanks for the presentation. It's neat to see the changes, and there's features I'm really interested to see once they come to life. I'm slightly off topic, but you mentioned the new space around 9 Potatoes, or like, is that the room with the kitchen?
Room 6 is the space that Seven Potatoes worked with the City of Nanaimo to create, and it does have a small kitchen space.
Yes, it does. Through the chair to the committee member, yes. The Room 6 renovation we did in partnership with Seven Potatoes does have a small kitchenette. It does have a fridge, microwave, sink. So yes, there is a kitchen there. But there are other kitchens at the facility as well in Room 3, and we have a commercial kitchen as well.
Okay, sorry, thanks. I just, my organization booked the room with the bigger kitchen for like a community kitchen workshop for people with disabilities. And I thought I might have heard, like, I was like, oh, does that mean that one's been renovated? Because that would be really cool to offer some input too. But it's okay. I'm super curious about the Room 6 renovation as well. So I will definitely follow up at another time.
Thank you. I'll go to Tammy and then Sarah.
My question is about the ramp. Is there anything on the sides of it? Is it like, especially that curved one? Is it just the surface?
Or are there railings?
There aren't railings.
No railings, okay.
No, not in the design, no.
Okay, and then is it bushes right beside it? Is that?
Yeah, so
Like,
there'll be.
there's something from stopping someone from wheeling off the edge.
Yeah. So there will be a small curb there.
A curve?
Curb.
Oh, a curb, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and there are plantings and vegetation throughout the site in the areas where the triangles are located. Unfortunately, the pointer doesn't work, which makes describing it kind of challenging.
Okay.
But yes, where there are sort of voids in the design, that's where you would see planting and vegetation. Yes.
And then when you go across the bridge, so if you're in a wheelchair, you could go across the bridge and go to the raised areas around the trees. Is that right?
Yes,
as well?
you could.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the diameter of the space allows for the width of a wheelchair go around it, around the tree trunk?
I would say yes.
Okay.
It does, yeah. And given wheelchairs are varying sizes,
Yeah.
particularly when we start talking about electric chairs and things like that. Sorry, power chairs.
No, it's not an electric chair.
Yeah.
That's okay. Okay.
Sarah?
Just one question. You had mentioned that there's going to be outdoor tiling where the classroom area is. And I'm just honestly curious. I love at Westwood how we have those really great concrete tiles that don't have a lot of space in between them, that are just really easy to access with my mobility aid. And I'm just wondering if that's anything similar that'll be going in the classroom area.
Great question, and through the chair to the committee member, I don't believe this tile is the same standard as that we used at Westwood Lake. I'm certainly happy to follow up and provide a more detailed description on the technical description of that equipment, of that surface to the committee, if that's of interest.
Sure, thank you.
Anyone else wanting to weigh in? And we have a few members of this committee who were part of this committee previously that had input on this design. Is that correct? I know Jocelyn was a member at that time. Tammy, were you also a member at that time? You weren't? Okay.
No.
And Richard, you were as well? Okay, thank you for your work on this, and it looks like it's going to be a really great addition to Bevan Park.
Yeah, I don't think I was.
Oh, you weren't? Okay. I thought you were nodding.
I don't recall this.
Okay. Well, we had a few, and it's great to see what's come of it, and we'll look forward to the opening.
Great, thanks everyone.
Thank you. So we have no reports, but under other business, we have a transportation planning update from Jamie Rose, our manager of transportation.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for having us. It's going to be pretty concise. In January, we came with a report outlining some of the projects that we we're going to be working through over the year. And from that report, we had a couple of requests to come back and elaborate on the projects that we were talking about. One of those was the parking bylaw review, which we brought forward in March, and has just recently gone through council for support to progress to developing new bylaws. In May, we brought our pedestrian unallocated, and so those projects are now going into the design queue for construction potentially next year, but if not, then definitely in 2027. We then in July had a transit-focused discussion, both around the downtown transit hub and also just the sort of general terms of the coordination between transit RDN and the transit amenities provided by the city, so the first mile, last mile. And I don't think we talked too deeply on it at that point in time, but we do now have 2 contracts with new vendors to provide us with new shelters and benches. So over the next probably 6 to 12 months, we're going to start seeing a lot of the Pattison and plastic benches being either retired or relocated, and new ones being brought online. And so the update is that we're going to be coming back again in January with a preview for the 2026 work plan. And so we haven't fleshed all of those details out yet, but we will be for January, and giving everybody an opportunity to weigh in on the next phase of our work plan.
Thank you so much for that update. Next up, we have Darcy Osborne with an update on the 2025 55 Plus BC Games.
Good afternoon. So Nanaimo was privileged enough to host the 55 Plus BC Games September 10th through 13th. Thankfully, the weather was unbelievably spectacular and showcased Nanaimo like it needs to be or should be. But it was a really fantastic opportunity for our community to host this event. There was a host committee that established themselves a couple of years in advance that was primarily made up of local community members with a staff liaison, Grace Bell, who's our manager of arena and sport. And they primarily worked through the lens of ensuring that the games were accessible and inclusiveness. We saw 2,700 participants who are 55 years or above, and we saw 1,100 volunteers support that event, which is tremendous. Always a concern when you're trying to pull the volunteer committee together or volunteers together, but Nanaimo really showed up and really supported these athletes. The sport is accessible and inclusive in that it integrates people with disabilities alongside all participants and makes sure that there is a feeling of being welcome to participate. There are varying sports of high physical activity, such as hockey, soccer, triathlon, pickleball, to more minimal physical activities, such as cribbage, whist, bridge, 8-ball, snooker, darts, so a little bit less intense. The sport-specific rules are adjusted for the 55 plus population. For example, cycling or hockey had a restricted number of games per day, and you're required to use a golf court on the golf course. So different things were in place to ensure that people felt included and inclusive. The opening ceremonies were an unbelievable, beautiful evening up at the Sir Roxman Stadium, and we provided closed captioning for attendees who are deaf or hard of hearing, and that was a really exciting opportunity for the committee to be able to roll that out in an outdoor environment in a sports stadium. The opening ceremonies had a side-by-side utility vehicle to transport attendees with mobility challenges into the stadium. And I would have to say the highlight of the evening was a singer for O Canada was 106 years old and was transported by city staff to the place in the ceremony. A very, very fun part of the evening. The medal ceremonies did not use podiums. They were presented on level ground in the traditional configuration of gold, silver, and bronze. And all facilities that hosted a sport or game had to be wheelchair accessible, and this was a requirement of the BC Senior Games Society. Inclusivity was addressed by the BC Senior Game Society within the following guidelines. So the society works very closely with the local committee, and they encouraged that the host society incorporate Indigenous representation on their board, and that Indigenous components were required to be included at all special events and ceremonies, and we saw some of that throughout the course of that week. There was a requirement that there be a gender inclusion policy that was followed and presented within the committee. 17 of the 32 sports had a minimum of a $10 sport fee, so trying to make it financially doable for all. And the registration for the games, including the membership, was $120, so relatively affordable. Several zones, I would say almost all zones, do their best to help incorporate these costs for people who might be challenged. They also provide uniforms, the sport fees, some accommodation, some travel costs are looked after, and there's significant amount of fundraising that the zones embark on prior to help meet some of these costs, as well as looking for grants and sponsorship opportunities. The special events are all included in the registration costs for participants and their supporters, and of course, because the weather was so spectacular, we had multiple events down at Maffeo Sutton Park and throughout our community that were well attended, and very much enjoyed the opportunity to visit our local amenities and see how accessibility inclusiveness is important for the city of Nanaimo. And transportation was provided to all major games throughout at no cost to the participant. So all in all, the 2025 55 plus BC Games were very successful in Nanaimo, and it was really a pleasure to work with the community committee to try and help them navigate running, I think it was 33 different events in our community over a short time period. So yeah, I hope that if you had an opportunity to get out and see some of the different games or some of the events in action, that you as well might have had a chance to feel the appreciation that we received from the various different zones throughout our province, and hopefully they'll be back. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the update, and yeah, kudos to all the city staff who worked with the organizers on this, and I heard a lot of positive feedback about it as well, so thank you. And finally, we have an accessibility audit update about Maffeo Sutton Park, and we have Charlotte Davis, our Deputy Director of Parks and Natural Areas, here to give us a little update on this.
Thank you. Yeah, good evening, everyone. So a very quick verbal update on our progress with the latest audit at Maffeo Sutton Park. As you will recall, this audit was prioritised at a recent ACAI meeting to be our #1 audit priority, and the audit was completed on Monday of this week. It spanned from Georgia Park in the south to Lions Great Bridge in the north and included the entire park, including the parking lot. All of the park's amenities, including the parking lot, as I mentioned, were audited with the exception of the washroom, and the washroom will be looked at when we actually come to replace it, and then we'll re-audit based on that. We're going to be constructing that to accessibility, universal accessibility standards. So now the audit has been completed, our Rick Hansen certified auditor is working on compiling the report for us, and we expect to have those results within the next 2 months. From there, our next steps will be to bring those recommendations back to the committee and potentially even to look to prioritise those with the committee. We hope to be able to achieve all of them, of course, but there may need to be some prioritisation of what those recommendations are. I just wanted to let you know as well that we do now have a 3-year service agreement in place with our audit contractor, which is really good. They're Rick Hansen certified and just going to provide us with consistency over all of our audits, that we continue to work down that list as agreed with the committee. So I hope to be back here in January with some updates for you all.
Thank you very much. So just before we adjourn, I'll let you know that we are working on the meeting schedule for next year, and that's just pending the November 17th endorsement by council. But our next meeting will be in mid-January. And so we'll send that out after the November 17th meeting. Yeah, grateful for all of your work. Thank you very much. And I did just want to note that if you do have more feedback about the tenant protections, the last slide in the agenda package includes contact information for the senior community planner with City Spaces, and also for Christine Mays, our planner with the city. So don't hesitate to reach out. And if you want to CC me on that as well, or all of council, it would be great to be looped in on your feedback on that, because I'm sure some more ideas will come up. And thank you for that fulsome conversation today. So with that, I will take a motion to adjourn today's meeting. Moved by Nicole, seconded by Councillor Armstrong. All in favor? Okay, and meeting adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a lovely evening.